Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Cece and today I just couldn't resist. So I'm going to be doing a trailer breakdown and analysis of the official trailer for the Shadow and Bone series. Hopefully putting my degree to use. So just a few disclaimers before we get started. First, this video will definitely be spoiling some of Shadow and Bone, the first book of the Grishaverse trilogy, as well as Six of Crows, the first of the Six of Crows duology, and a little bit of Siege and Storm as well, which is the second book in the Grishaverse trilogy. So if you don't want spoilers for the book, keep that in mind. Also, secondly, there's the potential spoilers of me getting any sort of theories right. So in case I correctly predict anything in the show, do be aware that there is a semi-spoiler disclaimer there, I guess. And also, I am very sorry to the Eastern European pronunciations of some of these terms that I will probably not do very well at, so sorry about that. So quickly, before we dive into the trailer itself, I wanted to give a quick explanation or recap of the Grishaverse world. So essentially it's for those of you who haven't read the books or if you want to refresh, but in case you don't and you're just raring to go to the trailer, skip to this timestamp here. So the Grishaverse is a fantasy world that is based around a few set of countries. So you have Ravka, Kerch, Shuhan, Fjorda, Novi Zem, and the Wandering Isles, which should be having the map up here somewhere. So the most important of which for this show and well, this analysis will be Ravka and Kerch. But the main thing is that in this world there is magic. So there are people who have essentially superpowers known as the Grisha. So starting with Ravka, Ravka is a fictional sort of early 1800s Russia, and it's special because of the way that its weird military system works. So Ravka has a very unique military system in the sense that it has the first and second armies within its whole military. So the first army is made up of regular non-magical soldiers, and the second army is made up of the Grisha. Within the second army, the Grisha are split up based on their abilities. So some have power over people, so they can heal, change one's appearance, etc. Some can manipulate natural elements like water, air, fire, and some can manipulate composite materials, so metals, powders, chemicals, textiles, etc. And in extremely, extremely rare cases, you have people that can control darkness and light, which is why Alina being able to summon light is such a big deal. One of the main issues that Ravka actually faces and why they need such a big military is that apart from its extremely hostile neighbours, so Shuhan to the south and Fjorda to the north, there is the Shadowfold right in the centre of Ravka. So as explained by the teaser, this country has sort of been torn in half by the Shadowfold, which is this giant shadowy curtain desert area right in the middle of the country, and it's filled with winged monsters called the Volcra. So Ravka is actually where most of the action from the novel Shadow and Bone takes place. Kerch, on the other hand, is where most of the events with the crows, so the characters from Six of Crows, takes place. And it is based on an 1800s, almost steampunk Netherlands. So the book focuses a lot on the capital of Kerch called Ketterdam, so I'm gonna do the same. So Ketterdam is the capital of Kerch, as I said, and as the name suggests, it's basically Amsterdam. It's made up of many canals, it's got a red light district, which is called the Barrel, which is the centre of entertainment and pleasure. So it's basically a place for gambling, brothels, but there's also like large gang activity there, which includes the dregs, which I tend to refer to as the crows, but it's basically these guys. So beyond that, the city is also a big trade centre and is home to many, many wealthy merchants. So with that out of the way, let's get to the trailer. So we open with a few various flashes that we have seen previously in the second teaser trailer. We're treated to a sequence early on in the books, in which our protagonist, Alina Starkov, played by Jessie May Lee, enters the Shadowfold with her childhood friend and crush, Malian Oretsev, or Mal, played by Archie Renaux. We've been told through the second teaser that Alina isn't even supposed to be on this skiff, leading me to believe that Alina will be slightly more assertive than her novel counterpart, which I am all here for. Interspersed with the shots of the skiff with Mal and Alina entering the Shadowfold, we get a few various shots of this soldier running away, which is super understandable given we see a terrifying shot of the Volcra later. This soldier is Alexei, a cartographer with Alina, played by Antonin Masek, and it seems that the internet's pleas have been heard as he seems to survive. Though we do see him fall due to sheer force of Alina's power and desire to protect Mal from the Volcra. Actually, her display of powers is insane. Like, you'll see a bit more, but it's insane. You'll hear me say this a few times through the analysis, but I am quite happy with how accurate this section all seems to the books.
You're safe now. Tell me what happened in the fold. What saved you?
You won't believe me, but it was a sun summoner.
So we then find out a bit more about what happened to Alexei after his escape attempt in the Shadowfold. Pay particular attention to this shot in particular, and you'll see that his wrists are bound as a woman listed as Milana in the cast, played by Julia Brankovics, is wearing a very nice ring and using her powers to interrogate him, much like a Heartrender would. This is backed up by the stilted way that he seems to speak, so to me it just seemed a bit like he was speaking as if he were in a trance.
Believe me, but it was a sun summoner.
So now with this all in mind, so the fancy way that she's dressed, the fact that he's being interrogated, the fact that he's tied up, it all sort of leads me to believe that this is taking place in Ketterdam, or at least Kerch. So I think Milana could be working for a wealthy merchant, given her appearance, and I've heard some people say that she could actually be Nina, who has been tailored, so her face has been altered to look different, but I'm not sure about that. I just think she's Grisha working for a merchant. And also I think that Alexei could perhaps have been exiled as a deserter, or he could have escaped even beyond the Shadowfold and escaped Ravka as a whole. And as to why they're interrogating him, keep that in mind because we're going to come back to it. So in this sequence we also get to see a lot more of Alina's powers and the sheer force of them. As not only do we see this wave of power that managed to knock Alexei over earlier, but it also completely obliterates the Volcra. So her instinct to protect Mal being so strong, we even see the light under her skin light up her face. It's kind of a fitting metaphor for the way that Alina keeps her powers bottled up right under her skin but never let loose.
Is this true? Can you summon light? She's real.
So next we get to see a little more from a scene that we saw in the second teaser, but seems to be taken straight out of the books. So Alina is taken to see General Kirigan, or the Darkling, who is played by Ben Barnes, who also played Prince Caspian. Ooh, childhood crush coming straight back. Anyway, so he is the leader of the Second Army, and she is appropriately disheveled after what was an extraordinary display of power in the Shadowfold. So one thing I found super cool is to see the different uniforms of the Ravkan army, like absolutely on display in this shot. So you get to see a little bit of the regular soldier uniform for the First Army, but then you get to see the kefters, which is the colourful coat uniforms of the Grisha, and they look so good. So each colour corresponds to a different type of Grisha power. So the Darkling, with his manipulation of shadows and darkness, has a very appropriately coloured black kefta with black sort of stitching. And then we can also see Zoya Nazyalensky, played by Sujaya Dasgupta, in the Etherealki blue kefta with silver trimmings showing off her squalor status. So Zoya is another main character who we see in the Grishaverse trilogy. We also get to see a few Corporalki in red keftas and a Materialki in a purple kefta. and it all just looks, oh, it looks so good. I was so excited. So in the same shot as the Materialki, we get to see the Darkling symbol, which is especially relevant to his overwhelming presence in the scene, as he uses his claw-like ring to bring Alina's powers out. This scene is very reminiscent of the books, and it shows not only his super manipulative and threatening presence, but also his abilities as a power amplifier. We also see him looking a bit worryingly excited, a bit too excited about Alina's powers. We then get a look outside the Darkling's tent to see Mal's reaction to Alina's powers. He looks super shocked, which is no surprise given she'd unknowingly suppressed her powers for almost all her life, and he's known her for that long. We also get to see everyone else's shocked reactions on the camp. Even a few people in the back can be seen like staring at this giant ray of light. Also in this shot, a cool missable detail is we get to see the Ravkan coat of arms on the hat of the first army soldier trying to hold Mal back. So this coat of arms is of course the two-headed eagle holding a scepter and a set of arrows, which is actually meant to represent the two different armies. So to end this section, we get our first look, at least in this trailer, of two of the characters of Six of Crows. Kaz Brecker, a high-up gang member of the Dregs in Ketterdam, played by Freddie Carter, and Inej Gaffer, an assassin and member of the Dregs, played by Amita Suman. It's just a small moment here, but we can presume that they're referring to Alina or the Sun Summoner, as Alexei said earlier in the trailer. So just quick shout out to Wondrous Mel on Twitter who posted this, and I think it's a huge clue to what the Crows will be up to this season, as I think that there's evidence to show that this sort of ideology conflict, in the sense of like, wow, magic is real, and Inej sort of having to go against what she really wants to be able to do, will be a huge part of what they get up to this season. Back to the trailer.
Our enemies are threatened by your mere existence.
The whole world will be after you.
So as the music picks up, we get a bit more of the politics at play here, and oh, I'm super keen because it unlocks a few things. So first we get this lineup of archers about to fire, and I'll be honest, I went way too in depth into trying to figure out where these archers were from, but I think I'm just gonna go with gut instinct and say that they're Ravkan, given how polished their uniforms are. What I will go way too in depth in though is this shot here. So we get to see two armies, which completely different battles to the archers, I think, because of the weather. But this one features Ravkan soldiers to the right, as we can see from the mix of the 1st and 2nd Army uniforms, so definitely Ravkan on the right. And on the left, we have what I believe are the Draskella. Sorry if that is terrible pronunciation. So these are the only sort of military-like force that are in Fjorda. So they are elite soldiers who hunt Grisha for trial and execution because they believe that Grisha are demonic and evil. They commonly work with wolves, and they tend to be a bit more survivalist, so they go out into the woods a lot and they can survive in freezing cold woods, both of which could sort of combine to explain why their uniforms look as they do, so animal skins, rather than, as the book describes, a black and silver uniform. I think there are also a few other reasons for this new sort of look to the Draskella. So it could be because their original uniform was a bit too similar to the Kefta and could have been confusing for new viewers, but it also could reflect the traditional attire of Fjorda, which, to quote the wiki, is spun of rough materials and is often described as shapeless or ugly by other nations, which, oof, sorry hun. I believe we're going to get a bit more about them this season than in the original books, given the big role that they actually play in Six of Crows. So we then focus on two shots of Alina and Mal, one of which is in the forest at night and the other is what seems to be at a port. So I think these two shots are at different points in the book. So the first shot would be, I assume, when they reunite after Alina has left the little palace and are both looking for Moritzova's stag, which is a powerful creature that can amplify abilities. Given the steam or smoke coming off the ball of light, we can guess that she's using her powers to keep them warm, or even perhaps to show off her powers to Mal, especially as she only seems to be looking at him in this shot. I believe this takes place after the final battle because they're in a port town and they're wearing different clothes, so they could imply that they're about to escape Ravka by boat, which is what they do in the books. So it's just a theory, and I will expand upon it as we go on with this video, but this could actually be evidence to suggest that the Crows get them out of Ravka and help them escape. Especially as in Siege and Storm, if we're lining things up to the books, the boat they escape on is a Kerch boat, and the country they go to is Novyi Zem, which is where Jesper is from, another one of the crows. And, probably the biggest evidence, Mal has a friend there who is called Jess. So, I don't know, could all link up, or it could just completely not. So I suppose we'll see. And don't worry, I will expand upon this theory as more evidence in the trailer is suggested. Speaking of the trailer, let's get back to it.
The prize is 1 million Kruger. Bring me Alina Starkov.
We then move on to get a few really exciting scenes explaining a bit more about the crows and what they'll be up to this season. So we start off with the amazing Inej, I love her to bits, and we see a glimpse of the 14 knives that she has strapped to her body. It's very, very cool to see her and her knives on screen, especially the two she pulls out. So I believe that this is the menagerie, and that this silhouette is Tante Helene, played by Deidre Mullen. The menagerie, or as it's also called, the House of Exotics, is a brothel in Ketterdam that Inej is unwillingly hired at as she got kidnapped by slavers and sold to Helene. Tante Helene is the woman who runs this brothel, and she is known for treating the women who work there quite terribly. So the main gimmick of this brothel is that it's seen as exotic because it has women from all over the continent there which are given animal names based on where they're from. So you have the Sully lynxes, the Kalish mare, etc. So further evidence for this being the menagerie is also because you have the animal heads in the background of this shot, which could support the animal gimmick of the menagerie. So given what Inej is wearing, I believe that she's already a member of the Dregs at this point. So perhaps she's been forced to return, and perhaps she is there to threaten or interrogate Helene. We'll just have to see. So moving on, remember Alexei and his interrogation? Well, I think this is how the wealthy merchants of Ketterdam get information on Alina or the Sun Summoner, especially considering the second teaser has a woman's voice recounting the details to the Darkling. So the Darkling himself finds out about Alina a different way. And given the fact that the merchants wouldn't want to get their hands dirty, they ask various gangs, and notably our crows from the Dregs, to go after her. So for the prize of 1 million Kruger, Kaz and a selected crew go to kidnap Alina. Oh my god, we're getting heist mode! Ah, so exciting. I'm just very excited to see the crows in heist mode before their main heist. Speaking of their main heist though, this could actually be how the crows build their reputation and get hired to go break into the Ice Court, which is the prison they have to break into in the book 6 of Crows. Because in the books, it is because Kaz and his crew are able to steal a painting from the merchant who hires them, Jan van Eyck. However, I think that this is even bigger. Being able to kidnap the Sun Summoner or being able to get close to her would build a much bigger reputation to Van Eyck than stealing a painting. Speaking of Van Eyck, this could actually be him. However, I think they probably want to show off other merchants and they don't want to build in Van Eyck yet because of his explicit link to 6 of Crows. We then get our first shot of another one of the crows, Jesper Fahey, or the sharpshooter, played by Kit Young. He's in a gambling den, but it doesn't really seem to be a very upstanding one, given the posters behind him in this shot. Jesper, in the books, is actually a character that arrives in Ketterdam as a university student, but due to his gambling addiction becomes a criminal and a gang member. So I think this will be his character introduction, because we not only get introduced to his betting addiction, we also get his charm, as he winks, and also we get his sharpshooting, as I think he'll be betting that he can't shoot the coin, which, as we see in this shot, he manages to. One cool missable detail in this scene though is the poster in the back. So it looks like a crow with babies in a nest and writing along the side, which I'm assuming is the Shu language. So I'm assuming this is Shu language because Shu Han is based off a mixture of China, Mongolia and Kyrgyzstan and their respective languages. This poster could actually be foreshadowing the events of 6 of Crows, as the crows are tasked with breaking out the scientist from Shu Han, Bo Yulbea, of the Fjorden prison, the Ice Court. What's interesting though is that Bo Yulbea is actually listed in the IMDb cast list, so I don't think this is the only hint or foreshadowing to 6 of Crows that we're going to get. Speaking of the 6 crows, in this next shot we get to see half of them. So we also get our first look at the barrel, which looks appropriately grimy. We'll get to see 2 of the other crows in this season, and actually even in this trailer. Though the final one, sadly, won't be in this season. Wylan, I miss you. The final shot of this segment is a figure riding towards the Shadowfold on a white horse in a black and red uniform. I believe that this is Kaz in the uniform of the Darkling's personal guard, which we can actually see in this still. Looks like we have a proper heist on our hand with disguises.
Am I a prisoner?
All of Ravka is. Until you and I enter the fold and destroy it from within.
So no pressure.
So we then get a little bit more about the Darkling and his plans or motive. So stating that all of Ravka is a prisoner until the Darkling and Alina enter the fold. I think this could actually be later in the series, perhaps after the Darkling is, spoiler alert, revealed to be evil. This could be him trying to convince Alina to see his side once he is revealed to be evil. We then get this wonderful shot of the Darkling as he watches a skiff enter the Shadowfold, which is appropriately foreboding and dramatic as his black cape is billowing in the wind. Because he is significantly not on the skiff, I think this would be a shot earlier on in the series, perhaps after Alina and Mal's skiff first enters the Shadowfold, so very, very early on. And I think it will tease at his importance as a character before we've gotten a proper introductory scene with him. And it could also tease at his obsession with the Shadowfold. However, immediately after, we do cut to the final battle or climax of the show on the skiff. This is because we get a brief look at Alina's yellow kefta with black stitching. Basically, she looks far more ceremonial than the first instance we saw her on the skiff and in the Shadowfold. This is because in the books, this becomes a display of her power to foreign nations. This is supported by the IMDb with the various ambassadors listed in the cast. This could also be how the crows slip on the skiff. So hear me out here. Although Kaz is dressed as the Darkling's personal guard, Inej and Jesper look to be in fairly civilian or regular clothing in this still. Now, this could all take place before the final confrontation, and it could just be them getting information on Alina and trying to blend into the crowd. But I have another theory. So in this next shot, we see a bunch of Grisha are on the skiff, including what seems to be Zoya, here. There are also these soldiers who seem to be Ravkin, but the person in the foreground doesn't seem to be wearing a kefta and the colour of the trousers aren't right. So I believe that he is a member of the personal guard of an ambassador, and perhaps Jesper and Inej sneak on that way to be part of the personal guard of an ambassador. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Moving on, we get our first proper look at these Volcro with nothing in the way, and they look, frankly, terrifying. Like, there's literally nothing else I can say. They look freaky. However, this is almost immediately undercut by Alina's no pressure line. Given the way she looks completely bedraggled, we can expect this to be her first entrance in the little palace. I think this is cut off from a different conversation, probably about her appearance in front of the king and queen in the Grand Palace. You may actually notice though that these cuts and specks of blood on her face aren't actually on her face in the moments before she is taken to the little palace. So we can assume that the attack by the Draskella that happens on her way there in the books will also be happening in the series. We then get to see this audience with the king and queen, which looks appropriately early Tsarist Russia. Certain uniforms are reminiscent of old military uniforms of the time, and certain elements of clothing particular to European nobility are present in the costuming, not even to mention the similarities in the dress of the royalty. One fun fact about this scene as well is that in a still that we get looking from the perspective of the king and queen, we can see the author of the Grishaverse series, Leigh Bardugo, right there. Speaking of cool women.
Everyone is looking at me like I'm the answer.
Bring the light. Again.
The only thing more powerful than you or me. The two of us together.
Good girl. Now the work begins.
We get to see Zoe Wanamaker's Bagra! Ah! I love a training montage and two cool women doing it. Oh my dude, we love to see it, even if her teaching methods do seem a bit intense. Baghra, of course, is a mysterious figure who's also an amplifier and is out to stop the Darkling from his evil plot in the books. Looks like she's been translated well to screen, as we can see her saying, "Now the true work begins," alluding to her trying to train Alina to defeat the Darkling. Aside from this training montage in Baghra's hut, which looks about as dingy as I imagined it would, we also get the shot of Darkling and Alina, which seems to prove we were getting that Darkling content a lot of fans were hoping for. So for this next part of the trailer, we have this huge section which does just a bunch of quick flashes. So I'll be breaking it down into 3 parts. Please note that there's not really much in each shot, so it's a lot more theory-based, this section. So let's start with part 1.
If it goes wrong,
I'll find my way back to you.
How many bullets do you have? Not enough.
Here's the play-by-play. Inej gets, let's say, approached by Volcra. I trust her to be able to fight it off though, because she is my actual queen. So basically, this just proves that the crows will be at least on a skiff. And I think it makes the most narrative sense for them to be trying to fight their way towards Alina. Or maybe they've even helped Alina escape, if we consider the tweet I mentioned earlier and my theory. This could be reinforced by the light bubble around them, which doesn't seem to be as powerful as her past blasts, and could just have been a shot Alina fired off so she could escape. Next, we see Mal on the Shadowfold desert floor, firing up at an unseen figure. Though, given the cape, I think this has to be the Darkling. So then we get the shot that confused me the most in this trailer. So here's 3 theories as to what this is all about. Though overall, do keep in mind I'm considering it as sort of a hint or tease at future seasons, because the whole point of the final confrontation is that Alina has the ability to cross the Shadowfold. So I think it's supposed to be a big thing to say, oh, but we found another way to cross the Shadowfold, if that makes sense. So, number 1, Fjorda is described as being very technologically advanced, and in order to one-up Ravka, they could have built this train system. However, this fire could suggest that it's Grisha powered, and I don't think they'd ever work with Grisha. Not even to mention that why would they spend their time making a train when they could be so focused on hunting down Grisha? Number 2, I believe that this train skiff thing could already be in place, like sort of a secret train system, I guess, that is the crows use to get to safety. Number 3, it's a hint to Nikolai or Stormhund, who develops a way to cross the Shadowfold in Siege and Storm. Though it is decidedly way more low-tech in the book, so we will just have to see. Honestly, it will probably be none of these, but yeah, we'll see. Though do note that they are not on the automated skiff in this next shot, which seems to be suggesting how Alina escapes, which is the same way she does in the books. This also seems to be the bubble that we see in the earlier shot with Inej. That was very sneaky editing, Netflix, I see you. We then get some Melina, so Mal and Alina hugging, Mal promising to find her. It looks like the shipping war will continue in this show, folks. Though I do hope they actually make Mal, like, a more well-rounded character, I'll say. Sorry Lee, I love your books, but I think Mal just needed a bit more work. We then get to a little altercation between the Draskella again. That is definitely Mal, given the Ravkan soldier uniform. I think this could actually be when he first discovers Alina in the woods after she's escaped the little palace. Therefore, he's finding his way back to her. Next, we get an immense display of power from either the Darkling or Baghra, because she too can summon darkness. I think it would make more sense for Baghra to be in this shot, because they are unleashing their powers on the Grisha, and I don't think that the Darkling would ever do that. And I think it could especially make sense if she's being arrested after helping Alina escape. And then we get to see the blast closer up, and I have to say the effects for their powers look so cool, as it looks like inky tendrils in water. Oh, I'm so excited with the show, it's ridiculous. Then we get some more shot of the crows. Given the darkness of the shot and how sweaty Jesper is, I assume they're on a skiff. Perhaps if we're going with the theory that Alina has left and they have to try fend for themselves against the Volcra, they are preparing for the battle. Either way, they could just be preparing for the final confrontation on the skiff. And naturally, we get this super cool gun-twirling shot of Jesper in what I'm assuming is the barrel. Honestly, Kit Young really did his work on those gun twirls.
realized she has only one equal. There are no others like us, and there never will be.
You have no idea how much larger a role you have to play.
That was a lot of content for 15 seconds, Netflix. Thank you very much. So we get some wonderful shots of some ethereality abilities, specifically in Inferni, and I have to say it is very Roy Mustang of them to click their fingers to get fire. Then we get to see Zoya again with some sick squaller moves, showing off to various other ethereality and materiality. We then get to see Inej almost miss getting blasted by fire, so we can probably expect some Grisha to be in this climactic battle beyond Alina. And while I don't think it will be Zoya, as I don't think she's developed fire powers yet, my queer heart would love to see Zoya and Inej duke it out. Oh my god. We then get to see Inej throw a knife, could be out of Ulcra, given that they are moving towards darker areas of the Shadowfold. So I mentioned this shot earlier as I was trying to figure out the shadows on their face, as this is probably after they escape the skiff of the final battle. So this could be either the train skiff from earlier or a Volcra, and it seems like this is their last hope and they may not be able to be saved, and then the crows come and get them. Again, I don't know, but I am keen to find out. We then get more of the audience of the royals, specifically the cool use of the Darkling's powers, those inky shadows coming back. I presume in this voiceover he's talking to Bagra, telling her about how her attempts to thwart his plans were futile, especially as he seems to be in her hut. This voiceover also links to the fact that the Darkling is really, really old, so he definitely sounds like he knows what he's talking about. Oh, Zoya, oh my god, oh. Sorry, I had notes on this, but just look at her. This show is actually gonna personally destroy me as a bisexual. All I will say is that apart from how cool this shot is that there seems to be something attached to her arm. I was considering that this could be a sort of Yerda Parem like power enhancer, but again, I'm not really sure, so we'll just have to see. Next, we get our first look at the Apparat, played by Kevin Eldon, who is essentially the purely religious, not love machine version of Rasputin in the Grishaverse. Sorry to all you Rasputin stans out there. Notice though in this shot that Alina is not only dressed very, very nicely accessory-wise, but also has a black and gold kefta on. In the books, she only wears this at the Winter Fete, a celebrational ball of sorts, which we see a bit of in these stills. So her wearing this kefta is a big deal, as only the Darkling wears black, and they're set to perform their abilities as a pair. So backing up what the Darkling just voiced over sort of moments ago. Otherwise, the Apparat begins his conquest of being creepy and in Alina's face all the time, with what he says in this shot, which, given he believes she is a saint, kinda checks out, I have to say. And this builds into the next shot where we see her with Moritz-Sova's stag, which is a power amplifier, as we can see from the easy way her powers seem to build around her to her surprise. Next, let's get on to the final part of this trailer. They end this trailer with a sick, insane amount of very exciting shots, so let's get into it. So first we get what I first assumed was the Comedy Brute, which is a Kirch theatrical troupe that performs plays similar to Commedia dell'arte, a traditional Italian theatre type with set characters like the Harlequin, the Zanni, the Pantaloni, etc. But book readers may be a bit confused as to why there seem to be none of the Comedy Brute characters or archetypes like Mr. Crimson, the Lost Bride, the Scarab Queen, etc. Well, it may be because this could just be a general theatre troupe. Either way, given the sun character in the centre and the creepy masks, it seems the story being told is that of the Sun Summoner. We then get a shot of an Inferni in what could be our steampunk train from earlier, given the valves in the shot, perhaps boarding it in an attempt to find Alina as she attempts to escape. We then get our first look at Matthias Helver, played by Callahan Skogman, who is another of the 6 crows from Six of Crows. Matthias is a Fjordan Draskella who is shipwrecked and forced to work with his enemy, a Grisha named Nina Zenek, played by Daniel Galligan, who we actually see in the next shot. As for why he's in prison, well, I'll keep that a secret to non-readers and just say that we can assume that this is towards the end of the season and that he is in the Kirch prison Hellgate. This brings me to one of my theories about the season, which not only will we have the general Shadow and Bone storyline as well as the second storyline with the crows, I think we're also going to get a third storyline with Matthias and Nina's backstory, which won't be as prominent as the other two but will still be a main storyline. As for where Nina is, it could be a vision of Matthias's, or it could be her meeting the crows for the first time, as in Six of Crows she does know them before the heist takes place and they recruit her for the heist. So speaking of the crows, we then get a great shot of Inej's acrobatic skills, which she has developed since childhood before she was kidnapped. We can also see the silhouette of someone watching, potentially Kaz, maybe testing out her skills. That is, if we see her from the menagerie and from her first joining the dregs. Though, one missable detail, if we look at the paintings on the wall, we do see a little and grand palace, so I think that they could actually already be in Ravka in this shot. And potentially, this is a safe house they're in during the heist, or it could be Inej auditioning to join a troupe, perhaps to take part in the performances for the Winter Fete to try get closer to Alina. We then get the Darkling dabbing and causing an explosion. There's not really much more I can say except for maybe he isn't causing the explosion but trying to prevent it from spreading to other barrels, and I saw that some people online potentially thought that they could be in Kirch or Ketterdam in this scene, meaning that the crows are successful in taking Alina back to Ketterdam. Some more shots of my babies, the crows, but more specifically Jesper and Inej, him psyching himself up to go and shoot, which could further suggest what I was saying earlier about the Darkling being in Ketterdam. And then we get to see what I'm assuming is Inej's introductory shot. Perhaps this is actually a whole scene, including the moments we saw from the second teaser. I hope so. Some more food for Alina stands, once again seeing Mal run after Alina as she's being taken to the little palace in the Darkling's carriage, which we saw from the second teaser. The climactic battle once again, Alina and her yellow kefta reaching out to what I'm assuming is Mal as the Darkling stands ominously behind her. Even more food for Alina stands here, as Mal and Alina's childhood gets shown in these two shots. That is them as children in the orphanage in Karamzin, which they both grew up in. I'm excited to see the show explore their childhood a bit more, as Alina's journey with her powers truly begins there, and it'll be cool to see them really explore the aspect of her bottling up her powers and what it does to her. We then get to see Morozova stags yet again, but given the framing and sort of the outline of the shot, I think that this has more to do with the vision Alina has of it than actually seeing the stag itself. Either way, it's cool to know that the shot from the first teaser we got will actually be in the show. We then get a shot of Alina looking absolutely badass and like so cool. And about to use her powers, though I think the editing is a bit tricky here, because this first shot, given the cloak she's wearing, seems to be her using her powers to protect the stag from sudden attackers, before its antlers are turned into a necklace so it can amplify her powers. But in this next shot, she seems to be wearing the yellow kefta, the ceremonial one that I spoke about earlier, showing that she's on the skiff for the final confrontational climax of the season. So that second shot plays more into what we see in the final moments of the trailer, namely the show of powers to the ambassadors. Though I can't really see the antlers that she wears in this scene to amplify her powers. It could be that she's wearing them in her hair, or from the way it's shot, we can't really see them around her neck. Either way, we can definitely see her powers are amplified given the huge bubble she creates in the shadow fold. Also, the fun thing about this shot is that the skiff has the sun summoner symbol on it rather than the Darklings. So, we've reached the end of this trailer. So before we finish off this video, let's recap the three main theories of mine from the trailer. So number one, there will be three main storylines in the show. So Alina and the events of Shadow and Bone, Kaz, Inej and Jesper trying to capture Alina for the bounty on their head, which will give them a very heisty reputation, which will lead to the events of Six of Crows. Number three, probably not as prominent, but Nina and Matthias's backstory, so we really understand their relationship going into the events of Six of Crows. Theory number two, The final battle of the show will take place on a skiff where Alina is showing her powers to the ambassadors. I predict the crows will show up on this skiff as well. But here is where the theory splits into two parts. So there's situation A, which they could actually be helping her escape and get the bounty, which will lead to building their reputation. And in doing so, they take her back to Ketterdam, and the Darkling follows them all to Ketterdam. However, I think it would be slightly more dramatic if we don't know whether the Darkling survived or not, so we'll just have to wait and see. Then there's situation B, which is that they could perhaps be helping her escape, but they themselves get trapped on the skiff, and so she escapes, but they have to end up fighting the other Grisha and the other Volcra. And then there's theory number 3, which is about that train. Oh my god, that train! I didn't say this earlier with my other 3 theories about the train, but it could also be what David's skilled fabricator, played by Luke Pasqualino, is up to this season, because I know that we've seen a still of him. It could be how the Grisha on the skiff of the final battle survive. There was so much in there and I was just too invested not to analyse it. I'm so excited for this show, and even if everything here I said was wrong, I can't wait to see it on April 23rd, and I hope you agree with me. So thank you so much for tuning into my ramblings. Be sure to like this video if you enjoyed it, or if I pointed out something that you didn't notice, and leave a comment with anything I may not have noticed, or even your own theories. Thank you, stay fresh and fruity, bye!